First, let me say it's so lovely to be back in the Pacific region. I had the wonderful opportunity of spending 2 years in the Solomon Islands and then moved to Bangkok. What a culture shock. So I actually feel very comfortable here, and it's very nice to be back. Today, I'm going to speak to you about a concept that has been growing and growing. That is accelerated development. What is accelerated development? Well, it's basically an emphasis that the human development paradigm that we currently focus on, which focuses on growth and modern lifestyles, and has now produced this sense of urgency that we need to accelerate or speed up the process of development so that we can decrease inequality gaps faster and produce a sense of social harmony. Accelerated development has become a focus of international development organizations who are worried about achieving the Millennium Development Goals, particularly in relation to indigenous communities and least developed countries. There seems to be some kind of fear of being accused of not doing enough, and so development programs have begun to try to figure out how to make development take place faster. However, this concept, this development paradigm, perceives that indigenous communities and least developed countries are the target rather than the driver of their own development. There are 3 concessions that we need to consider when we talk about making development take place faster. We must ask, when we accelerate development, what are we losing? The first concession, I would say, is absorption capacities. I mean, all of us in this room, I'm sure you've been listening to people speak all day long. There's no way you remembered everything that everybody said. And so it is with capacity building. How much information and how quickly can an individual absorb that information? And this is a very critical question. Although it is the responsibility of those people who are delivering training, delivering coaching, and other capacity building activities to get it right, in terms of a particular context or cultural and historical framework, there's more often than not a gap in how capacity building is being undertaken versus the optimal approach in that context. Beneficiaries, and that is, in this context, local government officials, cannot drive the development of their community if they are learning through an approach that is at odds with traditional approaches to learning in their community. The sustainability of any development outcome relies heavily on the ability of beneficiaries, and particularly those in local government, to be able to take what they have learned and get it right in a very short time frame. And there is little room for learning while doing in this concept of accelerated development. We must also consider that in areas where access to higher levels of education has been limited, or where the quality of education has been substandard, this is a lot of pressure to place on individuals who will be the recipients of capacity building. And we must also reflect back upon ourselves as peoples who are also recipients of capacity building in our own fields. Some capacity building programs focus not on delivering information, but on the application of that information. Even then, it is a learned process, and information is always missed or forgotten. In my own extensive experience delivering training programs on monitoring and evaluation, and undertaking capacity building through mentoring and coaching processes, even the most promising individuals were incapable of retaining all of the information provided in a very short time. And then there's the issue of being able to apply that information consistently and effectively. Second concession, local wisdom. When we talk about speeding up development, there's little room for taking the necessary time to learn about local communities and their traditional governance, decision-making structures, about the local wisdom that's been gained over generations and upon which entire communities and societies function. For example, have we taken the time to learn and appreciate how a community defines progress? Is it also possible to accelerate development in communities and countries where the processes through which development programs are implemented are imported, or they have little credibility with the intended beneficiaries? Obviously, we all have experiences working with foreign donors, but how can these initiatives become locally owned when it is a foreign idea? And probably most importantly, can the results of these types of programs be sustainable if they are not grounded in local custom, in local practice, and local understanding? Effectiveness and sustainability necessitate time for the beneficiaries to understand and appreciate the intended outcomes of the development program, and to focus on achieving these outcomes using existing systems and processes to the greatest extent possible. This in itself is not a process that can or will or should happen quickly. The third concession, obviously building on the last two, sustainability and of course good governance. When development practitioners engage with stakeholders and the broader beneficiary groups, when with indigenous communities and specifically in least developed countries, we're making assumptions of an existing but weak institutions and capacities to implement good governance. Baseline studies are undertaken, we set targets within a predefined time frame, rather than devoting time to understanding whether the targets can be sustained once they have been achieved, and whether improvements in governance will be sustained as well. It's not a question of whether the beneficiaries of a project are genuine in their commitment, but it's really about what happens after the project has been completed, after the targets have been achieved, and the technical advisory support has been withdrawn. Can, for example, in this context, can a local government, the Department of Local Government, can they continue on working with the same intensity that they were with the support from outsiders? Further, once you take away the foreign support, local wisdoms and traditions begin to weigh heavily on processes and procedures again. And without this balance, local wisdom can have more significant influence. This is by no means a criticism of tradition and local belief, but rather an example to demonstrate that making development faster does not allow for new ideas and practices to trickle down, as we say, to the grassroots level. Sustainable change takes time, sometimes 15, 20, or even 25 years. So, accelerated development, it's a really nice idea, but we must ask ourselves, would the opposite in fact be better? Accelerated development is a genuine attempt to close human development gaps sooner rather than later. Amongst others, one of its aims is to demonstrate commitment to social fairness and equality by national governments, by donor agencies, and international organizations alike. Where the theory falls short, however, is in its foregoing of the three aspects which I just spoke of. They are crucial to ensuring that development is locally owned, is sensitive to community aspirations, its culture, and is accountable to the people it is intending to benefit. Thus, if we slow down the process of development, perhaps we are more likely to achieve the goals that we have defined. Sustainability and good governance rest heavily on the capacity of a community or a local government area to conceptualize and generate new ideas and act on them based on their own traditions and local wisdom at a pace which they are comfortable with. Rather than absorbing foreign ideas and skills, communities need to feel confident and comfortable implementing activities to ensure that they can achieve their goals. Sustainable development, therefore, is about the right pace, the right amount of information, the applicable policies and local ownership. Decelerating development, in this case, would mean development taking place at a slower pace, delivering smaller amounts of information over a longer period of time and through culturally sensitive approaches would perhaps be more effective in the long term. But we all must live in the real world, and we know that this particular concept will be a very tough sell to policymakers and the donors alike. Thank you very much.